What if the hero the world had been waiting for didn't wear a cape, didn't drive a fancy car, and didn't even have enough money for tomorrow's meal? What if she came from the very streets everyone overlooked, the girl no one believed in, the voice everyone ignored? That's exactly what happened with Amara. She wasn't born rich, she wasn't handed power. But when the moment came, she stood between danger and innocence, between cruelty and hope, and that single choice changed everything. Because sometimes heroes don't come from palaces. Sometimes they rise from the very places the world forgets. Before we continue, please kindly tell us where you are watching from, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Nup Stories always have emotional and educational stories for you. Amara was not the kind of girl anyone paid attention to when she walked down the street. 16, thin from skipping too many meals, her sneakers worn out at the soles. She blended into the cracked sidewalks of her neighborhood. But behind her quiet eyes was a strength most people never noticed, until the day it was tested in a way no one could imagine. She lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with her mother and little brother, Malik. Every morning before school, Amara tied back her braids, packed Malik's bag, and hurried him off to class before heading to her part-time shift at the corner store. Life wasn't easy, but she never complained. She knew her mother was already carrying the weight of 3 jobs, so Amara carried the rest of the homework done late at night. Dinners cooked from scratch with whatever was left in the fridge, and Malik's bedtime stories whispered with love even when her eyelids were heavy. People often underestimated her. Teachers saw a tired girl, not a determined one. Strangers judged her by her clothes instead of her character. But Amara's heart was bigger than her hardships. She believed that no matter how dark life seemed, you had to keep fighting, not just for yourself, but for the people you loved. What Amara didn't know was that her life was about to collide with a story that seemed torn, straight from the headlines. Posters of a missing child had been plastered across the city for days. A young girl, no older than Malik, stolen from her wealthy family. People whispered about ransom demands and dangerous men, but no one in Amara's neighborhood thought that news like that would ever touch their world. Yet destiny doesn't knock politely. It crashes in when you least expect it. And for Amara, the line between her ordinary struggles and unimaginable danger was about to vanish, because soon she would stand face to face with the kidnapped child everyone was searching for. But here's the twist. Amara would have no idea who the little girl truly was. She would only see a frightened child in desperate need of saving. And in that moment, without knowing the truth, she would make a choice that could cost her everything. What would drive a teenager with nothing to risk? Her life for someone she didn't even know? That's where Amara's story begins. The alarm clock buzzed before the sun even rose, its shrill ring filling the small 2-bedroom apartment that Amara called home. She rubbed her tired eyes, wishing she could steal just 10 more minutes of sleep. But she couldn't when her little brother Malik needed her, and not when her mother had already left for the early morning cleaning job across town. Responsibility was a word Amara had learned young, and it sat heavy on her shoulders every day. She padded across the cold linoleum floor, pulling her sweater tight against the chill that crept in through the cracked window. Malik, only 8 years old, was curled under a thin blanket on the couch. He stirred when Amara gently shook him awake. "Come on, sleepyhead," she whispered with a soft smile. "We can't be late today." Malik groaned, rubbing his eyes, and Amara laughed, the sound light but weary. She guided him to the small bathroom, brushed his teeth for him when his tiny hands fumbled, and braided his hair neatly the way their mom had taught her. She wanted Malik to look sharp at school, even if their clothes weren't new. Pride mattered. In the kitchen, the cupboards were nearly bare. Amara frowned as she searched, finally settling on toast and a single apple she cut in half. She slid one piece to Malik, keeping the smaller piece for herself. He didn't notice. She always made sure of that. While Malik ate, she packed his worn backpack, sliding in his notebooks and pencils. She tucked in a little drawing he had made, a stick figure family with Amara written above the tallest one. Her chest tightened, but she smiled. After walking Malik to school, Amara headed to her own job at the corner store. She tied on the apron that was fraying at the edges and greeted customers with a smile, even when some of them looked past her as if she didn't exist. The store's radio played faintly in the background, crackling with news reports. She half listened as she stacked shelves, her ears catching fragments of the broadcast. Kidnapped child, wealthy family, ransom. Her mind drifted back to Malik. She imagined what it would feel like if he ever went missing, if she had to plaster his photo on poles, begging strangers for help. The thought made her stomach knot. She pushed it away, focusing on the work in front of her. By the time she left the store, the sky had shifted into a bruised purple dusk. She hurried home, picking Malik up along the way. He ran into her arms, chattering about his day, his laughter bright against the weight of the city's shadows. Back in the apartment, Amara reheated rice and beans from the night before, stirring carefully so there would be enough for everyone. When her mom came home, shoulders slumped and uniform smelling faintly of bleach, Amara greeted her with a plate and a kiss on the cheek. "Thank you, baby," her mom whispered, sinking into the chair. They ate together. The three of them huddled close, their laughter filling the gaps left by an absent father and an unforgiving world. Later, when Malik drifted to sleep, Amara pulled out her textbooks. She studied under the dim kitchen light, fighting against her own exhaustion. To anyone else, it might have looked like an ordinary life, but inside, Amara was a quiet fire. She carried her family with determination far beyond her years. She dreamed of something bigger, of becoming someone Malik could always count on, someone who could lift her mother out of endless struggle. What Amara didn't know, as she closed her books and finally allowed herself to rest, was that her life was on the edge of changing forever. The posters of the missing girl, the whispers of kidnappers, the headlines about the billionaire family they were about to crash into her world in a way that no one could have predicted. And when the moment came, it wouldn't matter that she was just a teenage girl from a forgotten neighborhood, because soon she would be forced to make a choice that would test every ounce of the strength she had been building in the quiet corners of her daily life. Would she run and save herself, or risk it all for a stranger? That's the question destiny was about to ask Amara. The posters were everywhere, on bus stops, stapled to lampposts, taped across store windows. They flapped in the wind and stared back at anyone who passed with a frozen smile. A little girl with soft curls and bright, innocent eyes. Eyes that belonged to someone who had vanished. Amara noticed the first one on her walk home from the corner store. It was plastered against the side of an abandoned building, the edges already curling. She paused, her heart giving an odd tug. "Missing," the bold red letters screamed. Beneath them, a photo of the girl. Her name, Sophia Whitmore, age 7. Last seen leaving a private ballet class uptown. A hotline number followed, along with a reward amount so large Amara could hardly wrap her mind around it. $100,000. The figure felt surreal, the kind of number that didn't belong in her world. She thought about how many groceries that would buy, how many overdue bills her mother could pay, how it could change everything, but she quickly shook the thought away. This wasn't a lottery ticket. It was a child. Her gaze lingered on Sophia's picture. She looked like a doll, dressed in a soft pink tutu, with tiny pearls sewn into the fabric. Amara thought of Malik, of the way his laughter carried through their cramped apartment. For a second, she imagined him on one of those posters, his small face staring out at strangers while she prayed for someone to bring him home. The idea was unbearable. A cold breeze brushed her cheek, and she forced herself to keep walking. But once you saw those posters, you couldn't unsee them. At school, students whispered about the case. Teachers hushed conversations when Amara walked in, their faces drawn with worry. On the news, anchors recited the same grim updates every night. No leads, a devastated family, suspicions of a professional kidnapping. The city buzzed with fear and gossip. Some people muttered that Sophia's wealth made her a target. After all, her father, Richard Whitmore, was practically royalty in business circles, one of the richest men in the state. He owned skyscrapers, private jets, and whole companies that employed thousands. His name carried power, his family lived behind tall gates, and his daughter's face was now the center of a nightmare. Amara listened quietly whenever others talked. She had never seen wealth like that, except in magazines at the checkout line. To her, billionaires were myths, untouchable people whose lives were written in a language she'd never learn. The Whitmore might as well have lived on another planet. And yet Sophia's poster kept crossing her path. One afternoon, as Amara left Malik's school, she spotted another flyer stuck to a telephone pole. Malik tugged on her hand, asking for ice cream, but Amara couldn't look away. Sophia's eyes seemed to follow her. Big, trusting, and vulnerable. "She looks like she could be my classmate," Malik said softly, surprising her. Amara glanced at him. He was right. Strip away the pearls and ballet slippers, And Sophia was just a little girl. A child who probably loved cartoons and begged for sweets. A child who cried for her mom when she was scared. That night, Amara dreamed of Sophia. She saw her locked in a dark room, calling out for someone to help. She woke with her heart racing, the sound of Malik's gentle breathing in the bed across from hers anchoring her back to reality. But the dream left a mark she couldn't shake. The following week, the posters multiplied. Every block she walked seemed to have one. The reward number grew bolder, headlines more desperate. One evening, while stocking shelves at the corner store, she overheard customers talking. They'll never find her, not alive anyway. Kidnappers like that don't let kids go, too risky. Imagine the ransom they're asking for. Probably millions. Amara's stomach tightened. She wanted to cover her ears. It felt wrong, the way people spoke about Sophia as if she were a headline instead of a little girl. But the world kept turning. Rent was still due. Groceries still had to be stretched. Life didn't pause, even when a billionaire's daughter went missing. And so Amara carried on, though Sophia's face haunted her steps. Then, one rainy evening, Amara found herself caught in a storm. She pulled her sweater over her head as she hurried down a narrow alley, a shortcut home. Halfway through, she froze. There, under the dim light of a flickering street lamp, another poster clung to the brick wall. The rain had smudged the ink, streaking Sophia's smile into something ghostly. Amara reached out, pressing her fingers to the wet paper. "Where are you?" she whispered, as if the missing child could somehow hear her. She didn't know why the mystery clung to her so strongly. Maybe it was Malik. Maybe it was the unfairness of the world that some children were stolen while others were ignored. Or maybe it was fate, quietly weaving threads she couldn't yet see. Because soon, very soon, Amara would discover something that no poster, no headline, no whispered rumor had prepared her for. The missing girl was closer than she imagined. And when their paths finally crossed, Amara wouldn't think about reward money, or fame, or the weight of a billionaire's name. She would only see a terrified child begging for help, and that moment would change everything. The world had a way of reminding Amara that she didn't quite belong. It wasn't always loud or cruel. Sometimes it was subtle, the way people's eyes slid over her like she was invisible, or the way teachers sighed when she raised her hand in class, as if her answers couldn't possibly matter. Other times it was sharp and direct, leaving her with bruises she couldn't show. Amara had grown used to it, but that didn't mean it didn't sting. At school she worked hard. She studied late, crammed between Malik's snores and the hum of the old refrigerator. She handed in every assignment, even when exhaustion blurred the words on the page. But when the teacher returned her essays, she received polite but dismissive remarks. "Good effort," or "You're trying." The highest praise never seemed to find her. Instead, the spotlight shone on kids from better neighborhoods, the ones who arrived in shiny cars and carried backpacks that cost more than her, family's monthly groceries. One day, when she solved a tough math problem on the board, the room went quiet. Amara turned, chalk dust on her fingertips, a flicker of pride in her chest. But then she heard it, a boy's whisper at the back. "Bet she cheated. Girls like her don't know this stuff." Laughter rippled across the classroom. The teacher didn't correct them. He just cleared his throat and moved on. Amara forced a smile, but inside it burned. On the streets, it wasn't much better. The corner store where she worked saw a mix of faces. Some familiar, some strangers. A few smiled kindly, but many eyed her with suspicion. Once a woman clutched her purse tighter when Amara passed by, as if a 16-year-old balancing a sack of groceries might rob her. Another time, a customer accused her of shortchanging him. Her boss, instead of defending her, made her return the money out of her own wages, even though she knew she'd counted correctly. "Be grateful you've got a job at all," he muttered. Amara bit her tongue. Gratitude had been drilled into her, but sometimes it felt like a leash. Even at home, where she tried to shield her mother from more worry, she couldn't escape the weight of judgment. Their landlord never fixed the leaks in the ceiling. Yet he complained if the rent was even a day late. His eyes lingered on her mother longer than they should when she handed over the envelope of cash, and Amara hated the way it made her mom's shoulders tighten. Malik, young and innocent, didn't see it yet. To him, the world was still an adventure waiting to unfold. But Amara saw the cracks. She felt them every time someone dismissed her dreams, every time opportunity passed her by because of her zip code, her skin, or the way poverty clung to her like a shadow. One afternoon, after school, she passed by a group of girls standing outside a cafe. Their polished nails wrapped around cups of iced lattes. Their laughter chimed like bells as they shared gossip. Amara walked by quickly, clutching her frayed backpack tighter. She caught fragments of their words. Charity case. Look at her shoes. Her cheeks burned, but she kept walking. She had learned long ago not to stop, not to let their words stick. Still, later that night, when she untied her shoes and saw the holes in the fabric, she couldn't help the sting of their voices echoing in her head. The unfairness of it all gnawed at her. She worked harder than most, yet doors stayed closed. She cared deeply for others, yet strangers treated her with suspicion. She dreamed of better, but reality kept reminding her of her place. And yet, even as the world tried to box her in, Amara carried herself with quiet resilience. She looked after Malik, even when it meant skipping her own meals. She helped her mother, even when her back ached from long shifts. She walked with her head high, even when whispers tried to drag it down. But beneath that resilience was something fragile, a longing to be seen, to be valued, to prove that she mattered. That longing was why the missing poster struck her so deeply. Sophia Whitmore, the billionaire's daughter, had the whole city searching for her. Her face appeared on every street corner, her name on every tongue. Newscasters spoke with urgency. Police spared no expense. Volunteers lined up to help. And Amara couldn't help but wonder if Malik ever disappeared. Would the world care the same way? Would strangers print his picture? Would officers search tirelessly? Would the city pause for him? Or would his face just become another name lost in the shadows, ignored because of where he came from? The thought made her chest tighten with a mix of anger and sadness. Life was unfair, yes, but sometimes it was more than unfair, it was cruelly uneven. Little did Amara know. The lines of injustice she'd lived with her whole life were about to blur into something bigger, darker, and far more dangerous. The same society that overlooked her was about to put her in the center of a storm. Because when she stumbled across Sophia, not on a poster, but in real life, the city wouldn't be able to ignore her anymore. The girl everyone searched for would be in Amara's hands. And that moment, that collision of two worlds, one of privilege, one of struggle, would force Amara to face the deepest question of all. Could she, someone society dismissed, become the very hero no one expected? For now, Amara didn't know the answer. She just walked on, carrying Malik's laughter in her heart, ignoring the sting of judgment, unaware that fate was already tightening its grip around her path. It was late evening when Amara's world tilted. The city had already begun to quiet. The orange glow of street lamps painted long shadows across cracked sidewalks, and the air smelled of rain, heavy with the promise of a storm. Amara held Malik's hand as they walked home from the library, their steps quick against the cooling night. They cut through the side streets, a route Amara usually avoided this late. But Malik had begged to stay just a little longer at the library, his favorite place, where books transported him far from the struggles of their neighborhood. By the time they left, the sky had already darkened. Amara pulled her sweater tighter, urging Malik to stay close. Almost home, she promised, though she couldn't shake the unease building in her chest. As they passed a narrow alley, a strange sound made her stop. It wasn't the usual city noise. Not a car horn, not laughter, not the shuffle of footsteps. This was different, urgent, muffled, like someone crying but trying hard not to be heard. Amara froze. Malik tugged her sleeve. "Amara, what's wrong?" She didn't answer. She listened, and then she heard it again, a child's whimper, faint but real. Her heart stuttered. She thought of Malik, thought of the missing posters plastered across the city. Her instincts screamed to keep walking, to protect her brother. But something stronger pulled her toward that alley. "Stay here," she whispered firmly, guiding Malik to the corner where the streetlight shone brightest. "Don't move until I come back." His eyes widened. "But promise me, Malik." Her voice left no room for argument. Reluctantly, he nodded, clutching his backpack straps as if they were a lifeline. Amara turned and stepped into the shadows. The alley smelled of damp concrete and trash. Her shoes splashed through shallow puddles as she crept forward. At first, she saw nothing but scattered crates and the looming silhouette of a rusted dumpster. Then movement flickered at the far end. Two men. They stood near a black van, its back doors open. Between them, a small figure struggled, arms bound, a gag pressed against her mouth. The child's eyes were wide, shimmering with terror under the dim light of a flickering bulb. Amara's breath caught. She knew that face. It was Sophia Whitmore. Her picture had haunted every block of the city. And now, impossibly, she was right there, in the hands of kidnappers, fighting for her life. Amara's first instinct was disbelief. This couldn't be real. Not here, not in her world. But then Sophia kicked. One of the men cursed, and the sound shattered the illusion. It was happening. Amara's pulse thundered in her ears. "Run!" A voice inside her begged. "Get Malik and go." This wasn't her fight. But another voice rose louder, the one that thought of her little brother. What if it were him? Wouldn't she pray for someone, anyone, to step in? Her hands trembled as she pressed against the wall hidden by shadows. She had no plan, no weapon, nothing but courage that threatened to collapse under fear. Still, she couldn't walk away. One of the men growled, "Hurry up! Boss wants her delivered before midnight." The other yanked Sophia closer to the van. The little girl let out a muffled scream that tore through Amara like a blade. Her decision was made. She pulled a shard of broken glass from the ground, sharp enough to cut, not strong enough to last, and gripped it tightly. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure they would hear it. Then in a rush of adrenaline she stepped forward. "Let her go!" The words tore from her throat before she could stop them. The men whipped around, surprise flashing across their faces. For a split second, silence held the alley. Rain began to fall, fat drops spattering against the ground. The taller man sneered. "Get lost, kid. You don't know what you've stumbled into." Amara's grip tightened on the shard. Her knees shook, but she stood firm. "I said let her go." They laughed, a sound that echoed harshly against the brick walls. "Or what? You'll cut us with that piece of trash?" Sophia's eyes locked on Amara's, wide and pleading, and in that instant the fear in Amara's chest turned to fire. She lunged forward, slashing the shard across the arm of the man holding Sophia. He yelped, loosening his grip just enough for the child to stumble. Amara grabbed her wrist, yanking her away from the van. "Run!" she screamed. Sophia staggered, legs weak, but Amara shoved her toward the light at the end of the alley. For a brief, miraculous second, it felt possible. They could escape. But then the second man lunged, blocking their path. His shadow loomed, massive and unyielding. Rain poured harder now, drumming against the ground, against Amara's racing heart. She pulled Sophia behind her, shielding the girl with her own body. The shard of glass trembled in her hand, fragile against the danger towering before her. The men's laughter was gone now, replaced by anger. One of them growled, "Big mistake, little hero." Amara's throat tightened, but she stood her ground. She thought of Malik waiting at the corner, terrified and alone. She thought of her mother, exhausted but proud. She thought of all the times the world told her she was nothing, that her voice didn't matter. And in this moment, this terrifying, impossible moment, Amara chose to prove them wrong. She had stumbled into danger, yes, but she wasn't stumbling out, not without Sophia. Lightning split the sky above, casting the alley in blinding white for an instant. Thunder roared, echoing the storm raging inside her. The kidnappers closed in, step by deliberate step. Amara's breath came fast, her heart racing toward a destiny she never asked for. And though she didn't know it yet, this was the moment everything would change, the night a girl the world ignored would risk everything for a child the world could not forget. The end of Act 1 had arrived, and Amara was no longer just a teenager from a struggling neighborhood. She was about to become the only thing standing between a billionaire's daughter and the darkness. The rain fell harder now, thick sheets that blurred the alley into shifting shadows. Every instinct inside Amara screamed at her to run, grab Malik, disappear, and pretend she had seen nothing. That was the safe choice, the smart choice. But when she looked at Sophia, trembling and bound, those wide eyes pleading for someone, anyone to save her, Amara knew there was no choice at all. She had to intervene. Her pulse thundered as she shoved Sophia behind her, clutching the jagged shard of glass like it was a sword instead of a scrap from the ground. The kidnappers advanced, their boots splashing in puddles, their voices dripping with menace. "You've got guts, kid," one sneered. "But guts don't keep you alive." Amara swallowed hard. Her hands shook, but her voice came steady, sharper than she expected. "I'm not leaving her." The men exchanged glances. They weren't afraid. Not of her. But something in her eyes made them hesitate, if only for a heartbeat. That heartbeat was all Amara needed. She shoved Sophia sideways, whispering, "Go!" Then she lunged at the closer man, slashing the glass across his sleeve. It barely grazed him, but it startled him enough to stumble back with a curse. "Run, Sophia!" Amara shouted again. The little girl stumbled toward the mouth of the alley, her small legs pumping desperately. For a second, hope surged through Amara's chest, but the second man reacted faster. He lunged, blocking Sophia's path, his broad frame a wall of danger. Amara's stomach dropped. She threw herself forward, ramming into him with all the strength her thin body could muster. The impact barely moved him, but it was enough to knock Sophia sideways into the rain, buying her another precious second. The man growled, seizing Amara by the arm. His grip was iron, squeezing until pain shot up her shoulder. The shard of glass slipped from her hand, clattering into a puddle.
"Enough of this!" he snarled. "You're coming with us, too!"
Fear stabbed through Amara, raw and cold. She thought of Malik, waiting at the corner just beyond the streetlight, his wide eyes scanning the rain for her. She couldn't be taken. She couldn't leave him alone. Summoning every ounce of courage, she twisted, sinking her teeth into the man's wrist. He yelped, loosening his grip long enough for her to wrench free. She grabbed Sophia's hand, tugging her toward the street, but the kidnappers were relentless. The taller one lunged again, this time tackling both girls to the wet ground. Sophia cried out, the sound muffled by the gag, her small body shaking. Amara gasped as her chest hit the pavement, pain exploding through her ribs. Rain plastered her braids to her face, stinging her eyes, but she refused to let go of Sophia's hand. "Get the van!" one man barked. Amara's mind spun. If they dragged Sophia into that van, she was gone. Lost forever. And if they took her too, Malik would be left standing alone in the storm, calling her name into empty air. The image cut through her fear. She couldn't let it end like this. Summoning her strength, Amara scrambled to her knees, throwing herself over Sophia's small frame like a shield. "You'll have to go through me first!" she shouted, her voice ragged but fierce. The kidnappers cursed, their patience unraveling. One yanked her up by the collar, lifting her off Sophia. Amara kicked wildly, her foot connecting with his shin. He roared in pain, dropping her back into the puddles. Sophia scrambled backward, her wrists still bound, eyes wide with terror. Amara forced herself to her feet, chest heaving, lungs burning with rain and fear. She knew she couldn't overpower them, but she could buy time. She had to. Her gaze darted to the end of the alley where the street met open road. Cars passed occasionally, their headlights slicing through the storm. If she could get Sophia out there, maybe someone would stop. Maybe someone would help. She lunged again, grabbing Sophia under the arms and hauling her up. "Run when I say," she whispered fiercely. The men advanced, fury in their eyes. Amara drew a shaky breath, then did the only thing she could think of. She screamed, a raw, piercing cry that cut through the storm. "Help! Somebody help us!" For a moment, it felt like the city held its breath. Then, faintly, a dog barked in the distance, a car horn blared, and footsteps echoed at the alley's mouth. The kidnappers stiffened, exchanging quick glances. One cursed under his breath. "We don't have time for this." "Grab the kid and go!" the other barked. They lunged forward. Amara shoved Sophia with all her strength toward the street. "Run!" Sophia stumbled, almost falling, but her small legs carried her forward toward the faint glow of headlights. Amara turned back to face the men, her body trembling, but her eyes blazing. She had made her decision. She would intervene, no matter the cost. The taller man swung at her and she ducked, the fist grazing her cheek. Pain flared hot, but she stayed on her feet. She needed just a few more seconds. Just enough time for Sophia to reach safety. "Help!" Amara screamed again, her voice breaking. The shorter man snarled, rushing past her toward Sophia. Amara grabbed his jacket, pulling with everything she had. He dragged her along like dead weight, but it slowed him enough that Sophia reached the edge of the street. Headlights flashed. Brakes screeched. A car swerved, horn blaring, as Sophia collapsed on the curb, sobbing. The kidnappers froze. The taller one spat, "We'll finish this another time." In a flurry of movement, they dove into the van, slamming the doors shut. Tires screeched as the vehicle roared away into the storm. Amara collapsed to her knees, rain soaking her clothes, chest heaving with exhaustion. Sophia trembled beside her, gag slipping loose as she gasped for air. You're safe now," Amara whispered, though her own body shook. She wasn't sure if it was true. The kidnappers were still out there, and they had seen her face. But for this moment, the little girl was alive. And Amara had made sure of it. As she pulled Sophia into her arms, Amara's gaze flicked toward the street corner. Malik stood there, drenched and terrified, his eyes locked on her. Relief washed over her like a tide, but so did something else. Dread. Because this wasn't over. She had just crossed a line she could never uncross. The kidnappers wouldn't forget. And Amara knew deep down, She had just stepped into a battle far bigger than herself. The storm had passed, but Amara's heart still pounded like thunder. She should have run home with Malik and never looked back. She should have clutched Sophia's tiny hand and begged the first driver on the road to take the girl to safety. But when the kidnappers' van screeched away, she caught a glimpse of something. Sophia's locket glinting in the taillights. It had fallen from the girl's neck and landed in the puddle at Amara's feet. Inside, a tiny picture of Sophia smiling with a man in a sharp suit and a woman in pearls. Her parents, clearly wealthy, the kind of people whose missing daughter made headlines. Amara froze, the locket heavy in her palm. If they could afford pearls and chauffeur-driven cars, then this wasn't just some neighborhood kidnapping. These men were after ransom, which meant if they succeeded, Sophia's life could be cut short the moment her family paid. A thought clawed at Amara's chest. What if she was the only one who had seen where the van went? What if she was the only one who could find Sophia? The police never listened to her. Not when she reported the corner boys selling pills by the basketball courts. Not when she begged the principal to help Malik after the bullying. To them, she was just another black girl from the wrong side of town. Would they believe her now? She squeezed the locket, decision hardening in her chest. If no one else would fight for Sophia, she would. So she followed. Amara trailed the van's muddy tire tracks across broken streets, dragging Malik along until they reached the edge of the industrial district. Old warehouses loomed, their windows shattered, their bricks stained by years of neglect. It smelled of rust, damp wood, and secrets no one wanted found. "Amara," Malik whispered, clutching her hand. "We should go home." She crouched beside him, brushing wet curls from his forehead. "I need you to go home, Malik. Tell Mama I'm safe. Don't follow me, okay?" His lip trembled. "But what about you?" Amara forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'll be fine. Just promise me you'll run fast." Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded. She hugged him tight, inhaling the familiar smell of soap and rain, then pushed him gently toward the street. She didn't watch him leave. If she did, her courage would break. Alone now, Amara crept forward. The warehouse she chose pulsed with faint light spilling through cracks in the boards. She pressed herself against the wall, peeking through a gap. Inside, the kidnappers paced, their shadows long and jagged in the yellow glow of a single hanging bulb. Sophia was there, bound to a chair in the middle of the room, her tear-streaked face pale, but alive. Relief punched through Amara so hard she almost sobbed out loud. "Boss says we move her tomorrow," one man muttered, tossing a cigarette butt onto the floor. "Family's offering $1 million already." $1 million. The number made Amara dizzy. She had never held more than $20 in her pocket. The second man snorted. "Don't matter what they offer. Girls leverage until we get double. Then maybe we decide what to do with her." The way he said it, "decide what to do," made bile rise in Amara's throat. Her nails dug into her palms. She couldn't let them hurt Sophia. Not tomorrow. Not ever. The warehouse smelled of oil and rot as she slid around to the back. She found a rusted door, its lock broken, the hinges barely holding. With a shaky push, she slipped inside, crouching low behind a stack of crates. Her breaths came shallow, every creak of wood sounding like a thunderclap in the silence. The men's voices carried across the space, deep and careless, convinced no one dared challenge them here. Amara crawled forward, inch by inch, her eyes locked on Sophia. The girl's head drooped, but she stirred slightly, as if sensing someone nearby. "Don't move," Amara mouthed, though she knew Sophia couldn't hear. Her plan? She didn't have one. She only had instinct: get closer, cut the ropes, and pray for a miracle. But miracles came slow in her world. Suddenly, a door slammed at the far end. Another man entered, a tall figure with a scar down his cheek, his presence commanding instant silence. The others straightened. "Boss," they muttered. Amara's stomach knotted, so this was their leader. He walked toward Sophia, his boots echoing on the concrete. He crouched, tilting her chin up with 2 fingers. "Pretty little thing," he murmured. "Your daddy should have paid faster." Sophia whimpered, flinching away. The boss smirked, then stood, addressing his men. "Keep her ready. At dawn, we send proof of life. Tonight, make sure no one's sniffing around. If the cops find us, she's finished." Amara froze, her whole body trembling. One wrong move, one careless sound, and they'd kill the girl. Her mind spun. She couldn't wait until dawn. She couldn't trust the police, and she couldn't do this alone. Her eyes darted to a pile of tools near the crates, wire cutters, wrenches, even a crowbar. If she could get one, maybe she had a chance. But then the scarred man's head turned. His eyes swept the shadows, pausing dangerously close to where she crouched. Amara's lungs locked. She pressed herself against the cold metal crate, praying the shadow swallowed her whole. The boss's gaze lingered. Then, slowly, a thin smile curved his lips. "Check the back," he ordered. Boots scraped on concrete. Two men started toward her hiding place. Amara's heart hammered so loud she thought it would betray her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She only knew one truth. If they found her here, she and Sophia were as good as dead. Still clutching Sophia's locket in her sweaty palm, Amara whispered to herself, "Don't freeze. Don't you dare freeze now." And in that moment, crouched in the shadows of the kidnapper's lair, Amara understood. Sneaking into their world wasn't just dangerous. It was a fight for both their lives. The warehouse was colder now, shadows stretching long as the night deepened. Amara crouched behind the crates, her legs cramping, her hands numb from clutching Sophia's locket too tightly. Hours seemed to pass, though it might have only been minutes. Each second pressed down on her chest like a weight. Sophia sat slumped in the chair, ropes cutting into her small wrists, eyes half closed from exhaustion. The kidnappers had grown quieter, their voices rumbling low across the room. The scar-faced leader smoked near the door, every drag of his cigarette glowing like a warning in the dark. Amara's breath shook. She had come this far, but now, what? The tools she had spotted earlier lay too far away. Even if she crawled out to grab them, the men would see her. And what then? She had no weapon, no strength against men built like walls. Hopelessness seeped in, heavy and choking. Her mind betrayed her with images she didn't want. Sophia's life ending here. Malik waiting at home, Mama frantic and yelling when she didn't return. The police dismissing her again. "You should have stayed out of it, girl. This wasn't your fight." Maybe it wasn't. Maybe she was foolish to think she could fight grown men who lived in violence. She was just a teenager with worn sneakers and calloused hands from scrubbing floors. What did she know about saving lives? Her throat burned as the thought clawed at her. Maybe I should give up. She pressed her forehead against the crate, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. She wanted to scream, to sob until the whole rotten city heard her. But even that wasn't allowed. Silence was her only shield. The locket dug into her palm. She opened it again, staring at the smiling faces inside. Sophia's family. A father in a sharp suit, a mother with pearls, both of them looking like people from another world entirely. A world where money solved problems, where their daughter was a jewel everyone would rush to protect. So why was Amara the only one here? Why did it fall to her, the girl nobody listened to fight for this child's life? Her chest tightened, because nobody else saw. That truth pulsed in her veins, but it wasn't enough to lift the crushing despair. A creak echoed, one of the men moving closer. Amara stiffened, hand flying to her mouth to smother her breath. "Thought I heard something," the man muttered, his boots dragging closer to her hiding place. Her vision blurred. If he found her here, it was over. She nearly bolted, nearly ran out and begged them to let her go. But then Sophia stirred. A small whimper broke from the child's lips, so soft it might have been mistaken for the wind. Yet to Amara, it was thunder. She lifted her head, her tear-streaked eyes locking on Sophia's fragile form, and in that sound, in that tiny whimper, something shifted. This wasn't just about Amara's fear anymore. This was about Sophia's chance to live. Amara's hopelessness didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It became fuel, bitter and raw. The man's footsteps halted, only a few feet away. Amara's heart thundered so loudly she was sure it gave her away. But then another voice cut through the room. "Leave it. Rats in the walls, that's all." The man grumbled but turned back. His boots echoed away, fading into the murmur of their voices. Amara pressed both hands to her mouth, sobbing silently with relief. But her tears weren't only relief. They were frustration, fear, and the gnawing despair that she couldn't keep this up forever. Her body shook violently, exhaustion making her limbs heavy. She felt as though the walls themselves were closing in, the air growing thinner with every breath. She thought of Malik again, of his wide, innocent eyes. How could she face him if she returned home without the girl? How could she live with herself if she let Sophia die when she might have tried harder? The hopelessness pulled her under like quicksand, yet some stubborn part of her refused to sink completely. She couldn't give up. Not yet. Her mind replayed Mama's voice from 1,000 small battles. When the world won't open the door for you, Amara, kick until it cracks. Don't you dare fold. Amara gritted her teeth. Mama didn't know the kind of door she was facing now, but the words mattered. She wiped her tears with the back of her sleeve, her breathing ragged. She didn't know how she'd do it, but she swore she wouldn't leave Sophia here. Still, doubt slithered in. What if trying just gets us both killed? The thought nearly crushed her again. Her body felt like lead, her spirit frayed thin. She wanted to curl up in the shadows and disappear, to let the night swallow her so she wouldn't have to choose. But then Sophia's head lifted slightly, her glassy eyes meeting Amara's through the gloom. Just for a moment. It was enough. The look was desperate, fragile, but it was also pleading. A silent message. Don't leave me. Amara's chest heaved. She pressed her lips together, nodding ever so slightly. A promise. The hopelessness didn't vanish. It lingered, cold and heavy. But she forced herself to sit up straighter, her trembling hands curling into fists. Even if escape seemed impossible, she had to try. Because to Sophia, Amara was the only light left in this darkness. Amara's body shook with exhaustion, but her mind clung stubbornly to one truth. Sophia needed her. Giving up wasn't an option anymore. Her eyes darted toward the tools scattered near the crates. A sharp piece of metal wire glinted faintly in the weak light. If she could get to it, maybe she could cut the ropes around Sophia's wrists. Her heartbeat drummed in her ears as she crawled forward, every shift of her knees sounding deafening to her own ears. She froze whenever a kidnapper shifted, waiting until their attention swung back to their cards and muttered arguments. Inch by inch, she closed the gap until her fingers brushed the cold wire. She gripped it tight, the edge biting into her palm like a promise. Sophia stirred again, eyes wide when she spotted Amara in the shadows. Amara pressed a finger to her lips, mouthing, quiet. The girl nodded, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. Amara's chest ached, but hope flickered, small, fragile, but real. She crawled closer, keeping low, using the stacks of crates as cover. Her muscles screamed, her legs numb from crouching so long. When she finally reached Sophia, the girl's breath hitched, but she stayed still. Amara whispered, barely audible, "I'm going to get you out." Her hands shook as she slid the wire against the ropes. Each tug shredded the skin of her fingers, but she didn't care. The rope fibers slowly loosened, fraying under the steady pressure. But then, a voice barked from across the room. What was that? Amara's blood turned to ice. One of the men was staring in their direction, suspicion flaring in his eyes. He started toward them. Panic clawed at her, but she didn't stop sawing. Just a little more. Come on, come on. The rope gave way with a final snap. Sophia's hand slipped free. Run! Amara hissed. The girl shook her head violently, her fear anchoring her to the chair, but Amara grabbed her hand, tugging hard. Sophia stumbled up, her small legs trembling but ready. The kidnapper's footsteps thundered closer. Amara shoved Sophia toward the side door, whispering fiercely, "Go! Don't stop, no matter what!" Sophia hesitated, eyes wide with terror. Amara shoved again, harder. Finally, the girl bolted toward the door. Relief surged, until the man's hand clamped onto Amara's shoulder. She spun, wire still in her grip, slashing wildly. The jagged edge caught his forearm. He cursed, shoving her back. Pain exploded through her ribs as she hit the concrete, but she forced herself up, staggering in front of the door. If Sophia escaped, they'd come after her, unless Amara gave them a reason not to. So she made her choice. Her body screamed in protest, but she spread her arms wide, standing squarely between the kidnappers and the exit. Her voice cracked, but it rang loud. "You'll have to go through me first." The scar-faced leader turned, his face twisting with fury. "Grab her!" Two men lunged. Amara swung the wire, desperation giving her strength. She slashed at one, kicking at the other, her body a whirlwind of fear and courage. Every blow they dealt sent pain searing through her bones, but she refused to fall. Behind her, the side door creaked open. A rush of night air swept in, carrying Sophia's frantic footsteps into the dark. Hope surged like fire in Amara's veins. She had bought Sophia a chance. The kidnappers realized it too. The leader roared, "Forget the brat! Get this one!" Hands grabbed Amara, yanking her arms behind her back. She kicked, twisted, screamed, but they were too strong. Her body slammed against the floor, breath torn from her lungs. Through the blur of pain, she smiled faintly. Sophia was gone. Free. Her sacrifice had worked. The scar-faced man crouched over her, his sneer cutting like a blade. You think you're a hero? You just made yourself a problem. Amara's chest rose and fell, shallow and ragged. Fear pressed down on her, but hope still flickered stubbornly. As long as Sophia was out there, maybe the world would finally take notice. Maybe someone would come. And if they didn't, at least Sophia had a chance. Amara closed her eyes briefly, whispering so low only she could hear, "Mama, forgive me." When she opened them again, her gaze burned with defiance. She wouldn't beg, she wouldn't fold, even if it cost her everything. She had already won one thing that mattered, Sophia's freedom. Sophia's bare feet slapped against the cold concrete as she darted through the side door, her tiny frame swallowed by the night. The rain had eased, leaving the streets slick, reflecting the weak glow of street lamps. Her breath came in ragged bursts, every shadow stretching like claws toward her. Behind her, the warehouse erupted with shouts. "She's loose, get her!" The words crashed against her spine, propelling her faster. Her wrists still ached where the ropes had bitten deep, but she didn't dare stop. Boots pounded the ground behind her, closer, closer. Sophia turned down a narrow alley, the walls closing in around her. A dumpster loomed. She ducked behind it, pressing her back against the rusted metal, trying to quiet her gasps. Her heart hammered so loud she was sure they would hear it. Two men thundered past, their flashlights slicing through the dark. The beams skimmed so close she felt heat on her cheek, but then they vanished down the next street. Relief surged for a split second, until another shadow appeared at the mouth of the alley. One of the kidnappers. Sophia froze, terror locking her body. The man's flashlight swept slowly, carefully. The beam landed on the dumpster, crawling toward her. Her pulse roared in her ears. She couldn't wait. She bolted. The man shouted, charging after her. Sophia's legs pumped furiously, the ground slippery beneath her. Twice she nearly fell, arms windmilling to keep balance. Her breath tore through her chest, her throat raw with fear. Ahead, a chain-link fence blocked the path. Her stomach dropped, trapped. The man's footsteps pounded closer. "Got you now!" Sophia's hands gripped the fence, metal biting into her skin. She scrambled upward, shoes slipping on the slick wires. She hauled herself higher, desperate. A rough hand grabbed her ankle. She screamed, kicking wildly. Somehow, by pure instinct, her heel connected with his face. He cursed, stumbling back. Sophia climbed faster, adrenaline flooding her veins. She threw herself over the top, scraping her knees raw, and dropped onto the other side. Pain shot through her legs, but she didn't stop. She ran. The man roared, rattling the fence as he tried to climb. Sophia tore down the next street, headlights flashing ahead. A car slowed, the driver's face twisting in confusion as he saw her. Sophia waved frantically, screaming, "Help! Please, help!" Behind her, the men's shouts grew louder, echoing like thunder. For a terrifying moment, the car hesitated. Then, as the kidnapper's footsteps drew near, the driver flung his door open, rushing toward her. Sophia collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Relief crashed over her like a wave, but fear still burned, because in the distance, the kidnappers hadn't stopped. They weren't giving up. The warehouse reeked of oil and damp concrete, every sound magnified in the hollow space. Amara knelt on the cold floor, wrists bound tight with coarse rope. Her body ached from the struggle, ribs screaming where a boot had caught her, but it was nothing compared to the dread pressing down on her chest. She had done it. Sophia was free, or at least she hoped so. The thought was the only thing keeping her upright as the kidnappers circled like vultures. Scarface crouched in front of her, his sneer curling. He grabbed her chin roughly, forcing her to look into his cold eyes. "You think you're clever, huh? A little street rat saving the rich man's daughter? You have no idea who you're messing with." Amara clenched her jaw, refusing to answer. The man's palm cracked across her cheek. Her head snapped sideways, pain exploding across her face. The others laughed, the sound jagged and cruel. "Stupid girl," another muttered. "Should have kept your nose out of this." Scarface straightened, pacing slowly. "You ruined our plans tonight. That girl was leveraged. Without her, what do we have?" He gestured at Amara. "Just this scrawny little nobody." Amara's stomach twisted, but anger flared under the fear. "At least she's safe from you," she spat, voice hoarse. The laughter died. Scarface's expression darkened. He swung his boot into her stomach, and she crumpled, gasping for air. Pain radiated through her body, sharp and consuming. One of the men leaned against a crate, smirking. "Boss, why waste time? Dump her somewhere. No one will care." The words sliced through her like knives. No one will care. Scarface shook his head slowly. No. People like her. They need to be made examples. She thinks she's brave? Let's show her what bravery buys. He nodded to another man, who disappeared into the shadows. Moments later, he returned, dragging a battered chair. They forced Amara into it, tying her wrists and ankles tight. The ropes cut into her skin, every tug sending fire through her arms. "Now you'll watch," Scarface said. He pulled a knife from his belt, the blade glinting under the single bulb. "We had plans for that little princess. Since you ruined them, maybe you'll take her place. We'll send your picture instead. Show the world what happens when nobody crosses us." Amara's breath hitched. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. They weren't just cruel, they were calculated, willing to use fear as currency. The man with the smirk leaned close, his breath foul. "Scared now? You should be. Nobody's coming for you." He flicked her braids sharply, mocking. "Little girl playing hero? Nobody will even know your name." Tears stung Amara's eyes, but not from fear, from rage. Rage that they saw her as disposable. Rage that they believed no one cared. Scarface pressed the flat of the knife against her cheek, cold and biting. "Tell me, was it worth it? Risking your life for some rich kid who'll forget you tomorrow?" Amara swallowed hard, meeting his eyes despite the terror clawing at her chest. Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "Yes, because she's alive, and that's more than you'll ever be." The warehouse fell silent for a moment. Then Scarface's laughter rang out, harsh and cruel. He pressed the knife harder, nicking her skin just enough for blood to bead. Brave words. We'll see how long they last. The cruelty wasn't just in the blows or the threats. It was in the way they relished her fear, in how they tried to strip her of dignity piece by piece. They mocked her background, her poverty, her very existence, as if being poor made her less human. Every insult, every shove, every laugh was designed to crush her spirit. But Amara clung stubbornly to one thought. Sophia was out there, running, maybe safe, maybe already with someone who believed her. The men argued in the background, voices sharp. "We can't keep her here. The cops will be looking." "No cops believe a girl like her," another sneered. "They'll think she made it up." Scarface silenced them with a glare. "Doesn't matter. We keep her until I decide what to do. She wants to play savior? Fine. Let's see how long before she begs for mercy." Amara lowered her head, chest heaving. Pain radiated through her, but her spirit refused to break. Their cruelty fueled something deeper. Anger. Resolve. They wanted her hopeless. Instead, they lit a fire. She wasn't going to give them her tears. She bit down on her lip until she tasted blood, willing herself not to sob. She thought of Mama's tired face, of Malik's wide eyes, of Sophia's small hand slipping free of the ropes. Even here, tied to a chair in the hands of cruel men, Amara had one weapon left, her refusal to give in. Because if cruelty was their power, then defiance would be hers. The warehouse felt smaller now, its shadows closing in like a tightening noose. Amara's pulse thundered in her ears as she crouched behind a stack of crates, her breath shallow, every muscle trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Somewhere nearby, Sophia whimpered softly, the kidnapped girl Amara had risked everything to save. That sound alone steeled Amara's heart. The kidnappers' voices echoed, sharp and angry. "Find her! She couldn't have gotten far." Heavy boots pounded against the concrete, closer and closer. Amara pressed a hand against her chest, forcing herself to stay calm. She couldn't panic. Not now. She had seen too much, endured too much to stop here. Sophia's wide, tear-filled eyes met hers in the dim light. Amara held up a finger to her lips, silently begging the girl not to make a sound. She had no weapon, no plan, nothing but courage and the will to fight if it came to it. And now, the moment she dreaded was here. One of the men spotted movement, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "There!" he shouted. The beam froze on Amara and her heart lurched. They had found her. In an instant, she pushed Sophia behind her, shielding the girl with her own body. Her mind raced. There's nowhere left to run. This is it. Scarface stepped forward, his cruel grin illuminated under the single dangling bulb. The knife in his hand gleamed, dripping menace with every step. Thought you could outsmart me, huh? Thought you could steal my prize?" His gaze flicked to Sophia. "Hand her over, or you both bleed tonight." Amara's legs shook, but she planted her feet firmly. She had nothing, no escape route, no advantage, except her resolve, and she knew something these men didn't. She would not give up. Not now, not ever. "Over my dead body," she whispered, voice steady despite the fear clawing inside her. The kidnappers laughed, but there was a tension in the air, a shift they didn't notice. Amara wasn't just a scared girl anymore. She had survived the cruelty, the beatings, the taunts, and now, cornered with nowhere to go, she found a strange clarity. She would fight. Scarface lunged and instinct took over. Amara grabbed the closest thing she could, a rusted metal pipe leaning against the crate. She swung with everything she had. The clang echoed through the warehouse as metal met flesh. The man staggered back, stunned, blood trickling from his temple. "Run!" Amara shouted to Sophia. The girl froze, too terrified to move. The other men surged forward. Amara raised the pipe again, adrenaline fueling her every move. She swung wildly, desperately, sparks flying as the pipe struck against metal and skin. She wasn't trained, but desperation made her dangerous. Every second she held them off was a chance for Sophia to escape. Every blow she took was another reminder of why she fought. She could feel bruises forming, pain tearing through her arms, but she refused to fall. Scarface recovered, fury blazing in his eyes. "You'll regret that." He slashed with the knife, missing her by inches as she ducked. The blade scraped the crate, sending splinters flying. Amara's chest heaved. She knew she couldn't hold out forever, but she wasn't thinking about forever, only about now, about protecting the little girl behind her, even if it cost her everything. The circle tightened, men snarling, shadows pressing in. Amara gripped the pipe tighter, planting herself like a shield. Her arms ached. Blood trickled down her cheek, but her eyes burned with defiance. Sophia whimpered again, clutching the back of Amara's shirt. That single touch, the trust of a child, ignited something fierce and unbreakable in her. Amara straightened, raising the pipe high. "If you want her," she growled, voice fierce and steady, "you'll have to go through me." The warehouse stilled for a heartbeat. Then everything exploded into motion. The fight for survival, the fight for the child's life. The climax was here, and Amara was ready to meet it head-on. The warehouse echoed with chaos, shouts, the clatter of footsteps, and Amara's desperate gasps as she swung the rusted pipe with every ounce of strength left in her body. Her arms trembled, bruises burned across her skin, but she didn't let go. She couldn't. Not when Sophia clung to the back of her shirt like it was the only thread holding her to safety. "Stay behind me!" Amara shouted, her voice raw, eyes darting wildly for any gap, any chance to break through the circle of men. The kidnappers closed in, their faces twisted with rage. Scarface advanced, knife glinting under the harsh light. "You're finished, girl. You can't fight us all." But Amara didn't flinch. Something deeper had awakened inside her. Something born of every time she had been ignored, underestimated, or pushed aside because of where she came from. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for Sophia, for justice, for the right to matter. And then, like a crack of lightning, the world shifted. A siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. Red and blue lights flickered against the broken windows of the warehouse. For the first time, fear flashed across the kidnappers' faces. "Cops!" one of them barked. Panic erupted. The men scattered, shoving each other in their desperate scramble for escape. Scarface cursed, glaring at Amara. He lunged one last time, blade arcing downward. Amara braced herself, but the door crashed open. Floodlights flooded the room. "Freeze! Drop your weapon!" a commanding voice thundered. Scarface hesitated, knife trembling in his grip. Officers swarmed, weapons raised. Within seconds, the men who had terrorized Sophia were on the ground, their hands yanked behind their backs. Amara staggered, the pipe slipping from her grip. Her body shook, adrenaline draining out in waves. She turned, gathering Sophia into her arms. The little girl sobbed into her chest, trembling but alive. "It's okay, it's over," Amara whispered, tears streaking her face. She didn't even realize she was crying until they dripped onto Sophia's tangled hair. Then, something happened that made Amara's heart stop. The officers parted, and a tall man in an immaculate suit rushed inside. His face was pale, eyes wild with desperation. "Sophia!" he cried, voice cracking. Sophia's head shot up. "Daddy!" She broke from Amara's arms, sprinting toward the man. He scooped her up, clutching her as though he would never let go again. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he kissed the top of her head. "My baby girl. My Sophia." Amara froze. Her mind scrambled to catch up. Daddy? This man wasn't just anyone. Recognition rippled through her memory. She had seen his face before. On television, in newspapers, on the glossy covers of magazines she sometimes picked up at the corner store but could never afford to buy. He was Alexander Hale, a billionaire, owner of one of the most powerful corporations in the country, a man whose name carried weight everywhere it was spoken. And Sophia, the child Amara had risked her life for, was his daughter. Whispers erupted among the officers, confirming what Amara was only just processing. That's her, the Hale girl. She's the one who's been missing. Amara's legs nearly gave out. She steadied herself against a crate, heart pounding so hard it hurt. All this time, she thought she was just saving a helpless child. She hadn't known the girl's identity. She hadn't known the weight of her choice, or that the world would soon see her act not just as brave, but historic. Sophia turned in her father's arms, her tear-streaked face lighting up as she pointed toward Amara. "Daddy, she saved me. She didn't let them take me." Every eye shifted to Amara. For the first time in her life, people looked at her not with suspicion, not with judgment, but with awe. Alexander Hale stepped forward, still clutching his daughter. His voice trembled with emotion. You risked your life for my child." Amara swallowed hard, words catching in her throat. I couldn't let them hurt her. She's just a little girl." His eyes softened, but they were also fierce, filled with gratitude that words could barely contain. "You saved my world. I can never repay you for this." The warehouse felt different now. A space once filled with cruelty and terror had transformed into the stage of a miracle. But as the adrenaline wore off, Amara couldn't shake the storm of emotions inside her. Fear, relief, disbelief. She had faced death, endured cruelty, and stood her ground against monsters. And now the truth lay bare. The child she had protected was a billionaire's daughter. Officers led the kidnappers out, their curses drowned by flashing cameras outside. The world already knew. Reporters swarmed, microphones raised, cameras flashing. News vans had gathered like vultures, broadcasting every detail live. When Amara stepped out of the warehouse, the crowd erupted. Questions flew. Who is she? How did she do it? Is she the hero who saved Sophia Hale? The lights blinded her, the attention overwhelming. But then she felt a small hand slip into hers. Sophia, her eyes tired but shining, stood beside her proudly. "Don't be scared," she whispered, as though she were the protector now. Amara squeezed her hand back. For once, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. She felt powerful. The twist had been revealed, the truth laid bare. A girl from a struggling neighborhood, underestimated her entire life, had done what no one else could. She saved a billionaire's daughter. But deep down, Amara knew the real story wasn't about wealth or fame. It was about choice. The choice to act when no one else would. The choice to protect innocence no matter the cost. And in that moment, with cameras flashing and the world watching, Amara realized something she never had before. Her life mattered. Her courage mattered. She mattered. And that truth was worth more than any fortune. The night outside the warehouse had turned electric. Police lights painted the street in flashing red and blue, sirens still wailing in the distance as backup poured in. News crews swarmed like moths to flame, their cameras snapping, microphones thrust forward, voices rising above the chaos. But at the center of it all stood Amara, bruised, bloodied, her shirt torn, her hands still shaking from the weight of the pipe she had wielded minutes earlier. She stood beside Sophia, the girl she had nearly given her life to protect. The crowd buzzed with confusion and curiosity, whispers weaving through the air. Who is that girl? How did she manage to save the billionaire's daughter? And then, from the darkness, sleek black cars pulled up, tires screeching to a halt. The doors burst open, and out stepped Alexander Hale, the billionaire father Amara had seen reunite with Sophia moments earlier. But he wasn't alone. A woman rushed forward, her long coat fluttering behind her like wings. Her face was pale, elegant, and streaked with tears. "Sophia!" she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "Mommy!" Sophia cried out, breaking free from Amara's side and running straight into her mother's arms. The woman dropped to her knees, clutching the child so tightly it looked as though she would never let go again. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, but no one dared interrupt the raw, unfiltered reunion of a family nearly torn apart. Alexander joined his wife, his arm wrapping protectively around them both. For a moment, the billionaire family stood in a fragile circle of love and relief. Then Sophia lifted her small hand, pointing back toward Amara. "Mommy, Daddy, this is the girl who saved me!" All eyes turned. The crowd hushed. The air shifted. And suddenly, the bruised, exhausted teenager from a forgotten neighborhood wasn't invisible anymore. Alexander Hale rose to his full height, his expensive suit disheveled, his face streaked with tears. His gaze locked on Amara, and for the second time that night, he crossed the distance between them. He stopped just in front of her, lowering his voice so that only she and Sophia could truly hear. "You risked your life for my daughter." Amara swallowed, her throat dry. She wanted to look away, to disappear into the shadows where she usually lived unseen. But Sophia's tiny fingers slipped back into hers, steadying her. I just did what anyone should do," Amara whispered. But Alexander shook his head firmly. "No, not anyone. People ran from danger tonight. You walked straight into it." His voice cracked, heavy with emotion. "You protected what I could not. My family owes you everything." His wife stepped forward, tears spilling freely now. She took Amara's hand gently, her manicured fingers trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. "You saved our baby girl. How can we ever repay this?" The cameras flashed furiously, capturing every second. The billionaire family, symbols of wealth and power, were standing humbly before a bruised black teenager from the other side of the city, acknowledging her as their savior. Reporters erupted, voices overlapping. "Who is she? What's your name? How did you do it? Are you a hero?" Amara's chest tightened. She wasn't used to anyone caring about what she had to say. Most days, her voice didn't matter. People ignored her, judged her, dismissed her. And now the world was demanding her story. Her lips trembled, but she stood a little taller, finding strength in Sophia's wide, trusting eyes. "My name's Amara," she said softly, though the microphones carried it everywhere. "I just couldn't let them hurt her. That's all." For a beat, silence reigned. Then, slowly, applause began. First from one officer, then another. Within seconds, the crowd joined in. Reporters, neighbors who had gathered at the commotion, even the officers themselves. Clapping filled the air, rolling like thunder. Amara's face burned. She wasn't used to praise, and it felt overwhelming. Yet in her chest, beneath the ache of her bruises, a small flame of pride flickered. Sophia tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can Amara come with us? Please. She saved me." Alexander exchanged a glance with his wife. Their eyes, still wet with tears, softened even further. He looked back at Amara. "I don't know what the future holds," he said carefully, "but you'll always have a place with us. You're family now, whether you want it or not." The words hit Amara like a tidal wave. Family. The one thing she had always fought to protect. The one thing she had always felt slipping through her fingers. And now, a man whose wealth could buy anything was offering her the one thing she valued most. The flashing cameras didn't matter anymore. Neither did the whispers or the headlines already being typed up. What mattered was Sophia's small hand still holding hers. What mattered was the look in her mother's grateful eyes. What mattered was that, for the first time in her life, Amara wasn't invisible. People saw her. People believed her. People honored her courage. And as the billionaire family gathered around their daughter, making sure she was safe, everyone else saw what Amara had risked: her safety, her life, her very future. She had stood between a child and death itself. And in doing so, she had rewritten her own story. The crowd outside the warehouse roared with noise, questions, applause, cameras snapping like firecrackers. Yet amid the chaos, Amara stood frozen, her bruised arms wrapped around herself. Only hours ago, these same kinds of voices, the same society, would have dismissed her without a second glance. She remembered it too vividly. Teachers who ignored her raised hand in class, store clerks who watched her like a thief, neighbors who whispered that girls from that side of town don't amount to much. Just that morning, she had walked past a missing poster with Sophia's face, her gut screaming something was wrong, only for people to wave her off. "Mind your business," they said. "Don't get involved." But now, after bleeding, after fighting, after nearly dying, everyone was staring at her as if she were carved from light.
Amara, look this way, reporters shouted. Hero, hero, the crowd chanted.
"Tell us what happened. Tell us how you did it." Her heart ached at the hypocrisy. Hours ago, her words were worthless. Now her every breath was gold. Sophia clung to her side, her small hand gripping Amara's fingers like a lifeline. The little girl's innocent trust gave Amara strength. She lifted her head, though her voice shook. "Nobody believed me before," she said softly, almost to herself. "But when it mattered most, I couldn't stay silent." The microphones caught it. The words spread like sparks in dry grass. Alexander Hale, Sophia's billionaire father, stepped closer. His voice carried, deep and trembling with emotion. "This young woman risked everything for my daughter. She didn't have protection. She didn't have resources. She didn't even have a reason to get involved. But she did what the rest of us failed to. She is a hero." The crowd erupted again, but this time, Amara's chest tightened with something sharper than pride. Because behind the applause, she felt the sting of truth. Why did it take saving a billionaire's child for them to finally see her? Her bruises burned, her torn clothes stuck to her skin, and yet the flashes of the cameras only seemed to glorify her pain. She wondered if they would have cared, if she had been the one kidnapped, if her brother had gone missing, if her mother had been the one crying. Would the police have rushed in? Would reporters have swarmed? Would applause have echoed through the night? The answer, bitter and heavy, whispered inside her. No. A reporter's voice cut through. "Amara, what was going through your mind when you confronted the kidnappers?" Amara hesitated. The easy answer, the one everyone expected, was to smile, to call it instinct or bravery. But something inside her broke free. She was tired of being invisible, tired of swallowing truth. "I thought—" Her voice cracked, then steadied. "I thought no one else was coming. I thought if I didn't act, she would die. I couldn't just watch that happen." She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd, her words sharpening. "But you know what hurts? Before tonight, nobody listened when I spoke. Nobody cared when I saw something wrong. If I'd been the one taken, would anyone here have cared as much?" The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable, undeniable. For the first time, the flashing cameras hesitated. A few lowered. Faces turned away. The weight of her question pressed down on everyone. Reporters, officers, bystanders. Alexander Hale's wife, still clutching Sophia, lowered her head, tears welling again. Even Alexander's jaw tightened, shame flickering in his eyes. Amara didn't say more. She didn't have to. Her presence, broken, bloodied, yet unyielding, was statement enough. Still, Sophia tugged at her sleeve, her innocent voice piercing the tension. "But I care, Amara. You saved me. That's all that matters." The child's words softened the air, pulling a ripple of emotion through the crowd. Applause started again, more subdued now, not the shallow roar of spectacle, but a raw, humbler acknowledgement. And yet, as Amara stood there, she understood the irony. She was hailed as a hero tonight because the child she saved belonged to power. Had it been different, she might still be standing on some dark street corner, doubted, dismissed, invisible. Her story was proof of society's double standards written in bruises across her skin. But Amara also knew this. She had broken through. They had no choice but to see her now. Reporters leaned in again, desperate to spin her into headlines, to capture the girl who had defied danger. "Amara, what do you want people to take from this?" She lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing her down. "That every life matters. Not just the rich, not just the powerful. Every child, every person deserves someone to fight for them." The words cut through the night like glass, Alexander Hale bowed his head, visibly shaken. His wife pressed Sophia closer, whispering something against the child's hair. The officers, too, seemed struck. Even the crowd grew quiet, as though the truth in Amara's voice demanded reverence. And though applause followed again, Amara didn't stand taller for it. She wasn't chasing their praise. What mattered was that somewhere in the silence, a seed had been planted. Maybe small, maybe fragile, but real. She wasn't just a girl from a struggling neighborhood anymore. She was a reminder, a mirror, exposing a world too quick to dismiss, too slow to believe, until the stakes were gilded with wealth. And as the billionaire family stood around her, as society finally lifted her on their shoulders, Amara silently vowed one thing. She would never let them forget this night. The street outside the warehouse slowly quieted as the kidnappers were hauled away and the last of the cameras lowered. The adrenaline that had carried Amara through every moment drained, leaving her body weak, her legs trembling. But as she stood there, Sophia's small hand still tucked firmly in hers, a strange warmth filled her chest. Everyone was watching. The police, the reporters, the bystanders, the billionaire family with their polished lives and unimaginable wealth. Yet for once, Amara didn't feel like the invisible girl from a forgotten neighborhood. She felt like herself, seen for what she truly was, a fighter, a protector, a girl who refused to turn her back on injustice. Alexander Hale, his arm wrapped protectively around Sophia, stepped closer. His voice was steady but heavy with meaning. "Amara, tonight you reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Money can buy safety, it can buy walls, guards, cameras. But when all that failed, it was you, someone with nothing to gain, who had the courage to act." His words hung in the air, thick with truth. The crowd shifted, listening, reflecting. Amara glanced at him, then at his wife, who still wept quietly with Sophia pressed against her chest. Her gaze swept back to the officers, the reporters, the neighbors staring at her in awe. She drew in a shaky breath and let the words pour from her heart. Courage doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from power. It comes from here. She pressed her hand over her chest. From choosing to stand up when it would be easier to stay quiet. From protecting someone even when you're scared yourself. The silence that followed was different now. Not the heavy silence of doubt or dismissal, but the reverent silence of understanding, the kind that wrapped around a truth too pure to ignore. Sophia lifted her head from her mother's shoulder, her tear-streaked face glowing with childlike certainty. "Amara's brave because she loves people. That's why she saved me." The crowd softened at that, many wiping at their own eyes. Even hardened officers shifted uncomfortably, their jaws tight with emotion. Amara felt her throat tighten. She had never thought of herself as brave. She was just a girl who helped her mom, looked after her little brother, tried to survive in a world that often refused to see her. Yet here she was, standing in the ruins of a nightmare, proving that true courage needed no wealth, no title, no spotlight. It needed only a heart willing to act. Alexander Hale nodded slowly, his voice quiet but firm. "She's right. Courage is not born in boardrooms or bought with bank accounts. It's born in people like you, Amara. People willing to put themselves last for the sake of someone else." Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, but Amara no longer cared about the spectacle. She wasn't speaking for them. She was speaking for every kid who had ever been overlooked, every mother struggling alone, every voice that had been silenced by doubt. She tightened her grip on Sophia's hand, and for the first time, she felt a calm certainty settle into her bones. Wealth doesn't make you brave. Titles don't make you strong. What matters is what you choose to do when fear is staring you in the face. That's courage. That's what saves lives. The crowd erupted, not in chaotic noise, but in a ripple of applause that felt genuine, heartfelt. It wasn't just for the spectacle anymore. It was for the truth she had spoken. And as the billionaire family stood by her side, not above her, society itself seemed to bow to a lesson too clear to deny. True courage didn't come from wealth, but from the heart. The chaos slowly melted into the night. Police cars pulled away, reporters drifted toward their vans, and the flashing lights faded from the street. For the first time since the ordeal began, quiet returned. Amara stood there in the stillness, Sophia's tiny hand still clutching hers. Her body ached, her clothes torn, and exhaustion clung to her bones. Yet inside her chest, a strange, steady warmth pulsed. She had made it through. Sophia was safe. Then she saw her mother. A figure pushed through the thinning crowd. Her mother, wrapped in a faded coat, hair untidy from rushing out, eyes red and wide with terror. "Amara!" she cried, her voice breaking. She stumbled forward, and before Amara could even react, her mother's arms wrapped around her, trembling with relief. "My baby, you're alive. Thank God, you're alive." Amara clung to her, tears spilling freely. All the fear she had swallowed down inside the warehouse now came pouring out, and in her mother's arms, she finally let herself cry. "I thought I'd lost you," her mother whispered, rocking her gently like she had when Amara was small. "I was so scared." "I'm okay, Mama," Amara managed, though her voice cracked. "I had to help her. I couldn't just leave her." Her mother pulled back just enough to look at her, eyes shining with pride even through the tears. "You've always had a brave heart, Amara. Always." But then, something unexpected happened. Alexander Hale, Sophia's father, approached quietly with his wife and daughter at his side. For a moment, Amara's mother stiffened, uncertain. People like them lived in another world, far removed from hers. Yet Alexander's expression was soft, humbled. He extended a hand toward Amara's mother. "Ma'am," he said with sincerity that silenced the lingering whispers around them, "your daughter is extraordinary. She saved my little girl when no one else could. My family owes her everything." Amara's mother hesitated, overwhelmed. "She's just a child herself," she murmured. "She shouldn't have had to be so brave." Alexander's wife stepped forward, her own eyes swollen from crying. She placed a hand over Amara's mother's. "That's exactly why we want to help. Please, let us do something for your family." The words landed like a shock. Amara and her mother exchanged a startled glance. "Help? From billionaires?" Sophia tugged on her father's sleeve, her voice sweet and insistent. "Daddy, can Amara come to our house? I want to see her again. She's my hero." Alexander smiled faintly at his daughter's stubbornness. "We'll see her again, sweetheart," he promised, then turned back to Amara and her mother. "I mean it. If you ever need anything, school, medical bills, a safe place, we will be there. You are part of our story now, and we will not forget you." The sincerity in his voice rang clear. For once, it wasn't just charity, it wasn't just a show for cameras, it was gratitude, raw and unshaken. Tears welled in Amara's mother's eyes again, but this time they weren't only from fear. They were from relief, the kind she hadn't felt in years. The weight she carried every day, raising her children alone, scraping by, fighting battles no one saw. For the first time, she felt like someone powerful was willing to stand beside her instead of turning away. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You don't need to say anything," Alexander's wife replied softly. "Just know that your daughter's courage has changed us, and we want to honor that by making sure she never feels alone again." For Amara, the moment was overwhelming. She wasn't used to kindness from strangers, let alone from people the world considered untouchable. To see her mother, who had spent her life fighting uphill battles, receive respect and compassion was more healing than any applause from the crowd. Her younger brother, who had been standing shyly behind their mother, peeked out now. He darted forward and wrapped his arms around Amara's waist. "You're my hero too," he whispered, his small voice muffled against her torn shirt. Amara's throat tightened. She knelt and hugged him back fiercely, whispering, "I did it for you too, for all of us." The street around them seemed to fade. The billionaire family stood nearby, their gratitude clear. But what truly mattered was here. Her family's embrace, their pride, their relief. She hadn't just saved Sophia that night. She had reminded her own family, and maybe the world, that courage doesn't belong to the wealthy or the powerful. It belongs to anyone with a heart brave enough to act. As they finally turned to leave, Amara's mother whispered into her ear, "You may have saved that girl's life, but tonight, you also saved us." Amara looked back once at the billionaire family, their figures glowing under the street lamps, then down at her brother clinging to her side. A tired smile tugged at her lips. She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel invisible. For the first time, she felt like the world had shifted, and maybe, just maybe, it was shifting in her family's favor too. Sometimes the greatest heroes don't step out of shining castles or wear the polished armor we imagine. Sometimes they come from the quiet streets, the crowded apartments, the places the world forgets. Heroes rise in moments we least expect, from those who have already carried the heaviest burdens, from those who know struggle so deeply that courage is their only option. Amara wasn't born with privilege. She wasn't raised with power. Yet when the moment came, she didn't hesitate. She stepped into the shadows, into danger, and chose to protect someone she barely knew. And that's the truth life keeps reminding us. Bravery doesn't ask about wealth, background, or status. Bravery comes from the heart. And maybe, just maybe, we all carry that same spark within us, waiting for the moment when the world needs it most. But now, let me ask you, would you risk your life for a stranger? Do you believe heroes are chosen by fate, or do you think ordinary people become heroes the moment they choose courage over fear? I want to hear your thoughts. Share your answers in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. Let's see how many hearts believe in everyday heroes. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss more powerful stories like this one. Because who knows? The next hero's story might inspire you or remind you of the courage you already hold.